I often get asked, "What's your favorite book?" That is impossible for me to answer. But there is a book that has impacted my life in 3 ways. When I was going to library school, I had an assignment where I could pick any question that a library patron might ask. I then had to provide a wide variety of resources to answer the question. I decided to use a real-life example for the assignment. My dad had been thinking about writing a memoir about the time he spent in Vietnam. So I found materials on how to write your memoir, the history of the Vietnam War, but I also had to find some fiction materials. There were 2 books that got excellent reviews. One was The Things We Carried by Tim O'Brien, and the other was Fallen Angels by Walter Dean Myers. The main character in Fallen Angels was black. Book reviews mentioned that black soldiers got put into dangerous situations more often than whites. I didn't think Dad would be interested in the book because of the focus on race. I gave him The Things We Carried instead, and he started it. When I asked him what he thought about it, he said he couldn't read it. There were too many topics in the book that just upset him too much, and it was just too violent for him. I felt like I had failed in my recommendation. The following semester, I took a young adult literature course. I was surprised to see that Fallen Angels, the story of the black soldier, was on my required reading list. I read the book and I loved it. The story was about a boy from Harlem who volunteered for military service shortly after he graduated from high school. Many of his experiences were horrific, and he definitely was treated unfairly. And there was even some raw language. The book has been banned in many schools. But what I liked about the book was that even though he was black, the main character could have been any naive recent graduate from high school. That is when I realized my prejudice towards author Walter Dean Myers. Most, if not all, of his main characters in his stories that he wrote were black, but he focused on what united people and not their differences. My dad had not talked much about his time in Vietnam, but I knew enough that he had enlisted shortly after he graduated from high school, just like the main character in Fallen Angels. So I asked him if he would try one more time reading a book about the Vietnam War. If he didn't like it, I wouldn't ask him to read any more. He did read the book, and when he returned it, he said that he liked it, and that he thought any person who was considering joining the military should read that book. It meant a lot to me that he was able to relate to that story. So, I learned not to judge a book solely on the race of the main character, and I recommended a book to my dad that he liked. And not too long after he read the book, he did write a book about his time in Vietnam that he gave to his family. Now, I know my recommendation wasn't the main reason for his completing the goal, but I like to think it gave him some motivation. And finally, Walter Dean Myers did an author visit at the school where I was doing my student teaching to become a school librarian. I had never met an author before, and so meeting him was like meeting a rock star to me. He graciously signed a couple copies of his book, and I am grateful that I was able to tell him how much his book meant to me and my dad. It was a day I will never forget.